All right, welcome back to Metropole Television. This is Business AM. Thank you very much for joining us this morning. All right, let's have a look at the biggest economic headlines that you're waking up to this morning. And to help us therefore go through the next 30 minutes of our conversation, we do have Collins Aloch, who's a lawyer and economic analyst, CPA Imak Munari, the managing partner, Nchoge and Associates. We also have Alex Ndagoa, is a lawyer as well. All right, President Uhuru Kenyatta announced Monday that workers would continue enjoying a maximum pay as you earn income tax rate of 25% instead of the normal 30% until January 2021. According to the Business Daily, income tax, value added tax and sales levy cuts imposed to cushion workers, households and businesses against the COVID-19 pandemic have been extended beyond December, even as bars are allowed to resume operations as part of phased reopening of the economy. Now, the president further added, to continue cushioning low-income earners, the National Treasury maintains the 100% tax relief for persons earning a gross monthly income of up to 24,000 beyond the sunset date of December 31st. Now, cuts on VAT to 14% from the traditional 16% will also be extended until January 2021, while businesses will continue paying a lower 25% corporate tax instead of 30% until January 31st, 2021, as the state continues to cushion enterprises grappling with the depressed revenues due to the pandemic. Now, the tax reliefs, which took effect in April, were aimed at lowering the cost of basic items while providing workers with additional income to spur consumption and boost retailers, flagging sales. Now, the decision to extend the tax reliefs come amid fears that Kenya would bow to pressure from the International Monetary Fund to scrap them to protect the country's revenue collection targets. Now, the IMF had urged the government to reinstate the higher taxes once the COVID-19 eases, stating that the cuts would cost Kenya Revenue Authority and compromise the state's ability to deal with emergencies and spending on development projects. Now, this will definitely cause carry, but how do we respond to emergencies and spending on development projects? Now, the KRA raised 188.08 billion in 2 months to August, with revenues falling 15% from similar periods last year, highlighting the effects of the disease on the economic activities. How can we better these collections amidst these reliefs? And that's going to be the question for you, Enoch, as we start this morning. Let's talk about IMF first. Good. We are celebrating that these tax reliefs have been extended. The economy is still getting cushioned from the effects of the COVID-19 pandemic. But there's that headline that were given a long time ago by IMF. They said, you gotta revert these tax measures or else you are going to struggle. Enoch, are they right? Are they not?
Thank you so much, Elijah. I think when you look at how a nation is built, a nation is built around contributions from its citizens through taxes, so that we can be able to achieve development of, even be able to pay our expenses, which are salaries and the other recurrent expenses. So if we have a situation whereby we are not collecting enough, then of course that spells doom to the nation when it comes to a push to allocate more funds to development, and that's what we want to achieve, especially post-COVID. So IMF are right that if we continue having these low tax rates, then we have a situation whereby we may not be able to hit our tax collection targets, and of course that will affect our ability to be able to develop the country. But then, having said that, the reality is that at the moment, the focus really has been for the last couple of months on how we can be able to survive this pandemic. And people have lost jobs, businesses have closed down, and we hope that more businesses are now going to open now that we're seeing easing of the restrictions. But the focus has been on how we can be able to survive. Then now we can probably start having the discussion on how we can be able to revive our economy, which probably now is about the time that we need to have that kind of discussion. So my focus will not be on doomsayers who are saying that, look, you must be able to revert back to the old tax rates. In fact, Kenyans have been taxed heavily for a very long time. And my prayer will be not just to extend the tax reliefs that we received in April, but to actually make them permanent and see how we can be able to improve them. We lose a lot of money through corruption. and a lot of pilferage, especially around the tax collection and the kind of theft, the wanton theft that we have in the government. So we cannot just focus on how much we collect, and yet we are not sealing actually the loopholes on how much we lose to individuals who are actually hell-bent to steal from the government. So KRA is doing a good job. They're coming up with new strategies every day to be able to see that we are actually hitting the target. Our focus should be able to shift to the national government, not forget even about the counties. Our focus should be able to shift on the national government and look at the measure that the national government has put in place to ensure that there is little pilferage, little loss of resource funds from the national coffers, which is actually what is bleeding this nation.
Pretty much, yeah. Enoch. Alex, I want to bring you in on that as well. Now, Enoch says some of this should be permanent if the government can actually be able to pull that move. But Alex, from what you said this morning, if you look at KRA's tax collections, in fact, the first 2 months of the new financial year, they actually did miss their targets and bigger that. Would you say that we can afford to make them permanent? Do we have that leeway to continue giving these tax reprieves to the economy?
Thank you. So thank you, Simba. I think number one is that studies that have been done around tax rates, and including even Kenya in the 1990s, have already showed that the lower the tax rate, the higher the compliance, right? So there's even empirical study where the moment you cut your tax rates from a particular percentage to another, to a lower percentage, you actually increase the collections. And this is because of one simple thing, that if you're taxing me at 30%, and if I move funds to a different country like Mauritius and I'm paying 15%, I'm saving up on 15%. But if you take the rate lower to 25% and it costs me 20% to take it to another country, then I don't have much incentive to evade tax and to avoid tax. So the lower the tax rate, the increased collections that we have. But that's not the major issue, I think, on this particular topic. The thing is, in the middle of a pandemic, where economic activity has been very low, and where our income tax framework is based on you actually generating income, on businesses actually generating profits, I don't understand why the sunset period is going to be in January. Businesses actually haven't taken advantage of that reduced rate, because the 25% rate assumes that I made profit in the year 2020 and I'm going to enjoy a low tax rate. But if I did not make any profit in the year 2020, if President Uhuru says that I'm going to do away with this in January 2021, very few businesses may have benefited from it. So I think the timing is very wrong. And I think that number one, it should remain permanent because it will lead to higher tax collections. Number two, it should remain permanent because at 25%, that's a very competitive rate that is going to attract many investments into Kenya.
Yes, Alex, just before I let you go in and bring Collins in on that, yes, you say it should be permanent, but when somebody is looking at that issue, when they ask you, yes, it has been lower, but the first 2 months of the new financial year, we have missed targets. Should have we collected more then because it was lower? Alex, if you can get me on that.
Yes, I can get you.
Yes.
Number one, it was very expected. I mean, in the entire world, I don't think there's any tax authority that actually met their targets, unless they met their they set their targets at a discounted rate to the previous financial year. Economic activity was low. Remember, again, the main tax heads for the exchequer is pay and VAT. Now, you can only collect higher pay if people are actually in employment, but most people, they had their salaries cut and most people had their jobs lost. Number two, VAT is also one of the major profit drivers for the exchequer. There was reduced economic activity, meaning that most suppliers actually sold less goods. And number two, we had a VAT cut from 16 to 14%. So I think missing collections in the recent quarter is something that was very expected. But then the question is, if the revenue was at a discounted amount to the previous financial year, then our recurrent expenditure should also be rationalized so that it's also up to par with how revenue is going up and down.
Pretty much. Collins, let me bring you on this now. We're looking back to a parliamentary report that was tabled at the National House that shows that our debt, that's the national debt, is projected to increase by 750 billion in the next 10 months, which is equivalent to an increase of 2.6 billion shillings a day. And this has been exacerbated by the effect of the COVID-19 pandemic. All right, let's therefore look at it in a whole sum from last year. We have, therefore, it will jump to 7.5 trillion by June next year. That is when our financial year ends. All right, and if you go back to where we were last year, then you will see that this will represent a 15% increase in debt. Do you think that anybody looking at these numbers, especially our lenders like IMF, will look at it and then say, probably, you guys have no leeway to really continue talking about cushioning the economy?
Thank you so much, Simba. And before I make my comment, allow me first to generalize this and look at the economic package as a whole. Where I see it from, the question, and I joined IMF in warning Kenya, the question for me is more of sustainability of the tax reliefs and sustainability of the economic package that has been issued by the president right from 23rd of March, I think, if not May. Of importance to me is the situation that Kenya was before COVID-19. We were a struggling economy right before that, and what COVID has just done is to expose the ineffectiveness of our government insofar as tackling even insofar as addressing economical issues are concerned. But looking at the wider picture, these tax reliefs are making us to lose at least 43 billion in our revenue collection. There's a drop of 43 billion in that. You know, the essence of an economic package, the primary purpose is really to address the issue to address the concerns of the target, and then maintaining maintaining the debt sustainability in the country. But looking at our scenario as Kenya, the economic package is costing us something close to 5.3 billion. That is 53.7 billion. Sorry, that is 0.5% of our GDP. Look at countries that have issued economic packages, right from Tanzania. Look at Rwanda. Look at Egypt. All of them have issued 2 digits vis-a-vis their GDP. Ours was so underwhelming. Talking about a 0.5% ratio to our GDP, and look at the issue of loss of employment, the issue of our commerce that has been so much dampened with a very heavy laden tax imposition, and look at the issue of people losing jobs in sectors that are so much important. Look at the sector of informal sector. Look at architecture and all those sectors that have seen at least 1.7 million Kenyans losing their jobs. Look at how the government has addressed that, creating 200,000, I think, opportunities for young people to come in and offer services that are not even concerned. That 200,000 people who are being brought in are not affecting the capital, are not affecting the revenue that was there. These 1.7 million people that we've lost have affected our collection. And so having these tax reliefs being extended to January next year is not addressing the issue and the concern. And I've said this before. The government ought to have come up with a package, a hybrid package, that is not only sustaining people who've lost their jobs or companies that are struggling at this time, because you're offering tax reliefs to who? Companies are already struggling. You're offering tax reliefs to who? You're saying that at the end of the day, you want to see that if we're offering these tax reliefs, you want to see that companies can be able to stay afloat and Kenyans can be able to still pay their taxes. The Kenyans that you're targeting them to pay their taxes have already lost their jobs. And so have a package whereby we are sustaining people, you're sustaining the companies that are struggling at this juncture so that we can have sustainability. But these tax reliefs, in my view, they are so much unsustainable.
Pretty much. All right, Enoch, I want to bring you back again on that, because yes, you keep on insisting, well, this thing should be permanent. Fine. All right, let's look at this statement that KRA has only raised 188.08 billion in the 2 months to August, with the revenues falling 15% from a similar period last year, highlighting the effects of the disease on economic activities. So the question is going to be, I mean, they're not going to raise much, yes, and the much they could have raised has already been wiped off by these tax reliefs that we're talking about. So my question for you is this: are you telling the government, why do you go back and borrow then? Because at the end of the day, KRA had the biggest mandate ever again to service our 2020-2021 budget.
I think we have to look at the current situation as it is and try to avoid statistical comparisons with the previous year because we did not have a period like we've had this year last year.
Yes, but Enoch, yes, I don't know whether Enoch you can get me, but we have to.
Activity for the whole year.
Yes, Enoch, can you get me though?
Yes, I can.
Yes, I like how you said we should not compare this with any other year, but we have to, because at the end of the day, it's going to factor in the way in which our economy is going to look and the way in which we're going to run next year or any other time we're talking about a turnaround.
No, I think the realization that all of us have had in the year 2020 that it was going to be a difficult year in this country. Not only have we lost jobs, businesses have actually been not performing to the optimum. And we, of course, did not expect KRA to perform some kind of magic and be able to hit their targets. Comparing that, as Alex had said, the same people that you want to collect taxes from are the same people who have been working from home, who lost their jobs. Businesses have been closed for a long time. And we are seeing the business sector like the bars and restaurants actually starting to operate from this period going forward. So we don't want to put a lot of pressure on KRA. I'm actually surprised that they managed to get to where they got, considering that it's only a 15% drop. Our focus should be able to be on how Treasury can be able to work around the situation as it is right now to ensure that the budget gaps are of course filled, and it's not expensive to be able to cover that because definitely the government will have to go the route of borrowing either locally or from our partners internationally. So we have to look at the situation as it is. How can we be able to get out of the situation in a way that we don't end up messing up the country with youth loans? And remember, we are the same people, the same parliament that we have that encouraged youth borrowings from the Jubilee government from 2013. So coming in now and starting to try and discourage Jubilee government from borrowing becomes a challenge because when they borrowed, we cheered them. And when they did unnecessary borrowing, we actually cheered them. Now that it's going to be very critical borrowing, we may have actually to go that route so that we can be able to cushion the economy for the next 6 months until the next financial year, which starts in 1st of July 2021, then we can be able to look at the situation and say, how far have we come as a country? What measures can we be able to put in place in the coming financial year to ensure that we go back to where we were in the early 2000 and probably mid 2000 in an economy that is blossoming. People are actually enjoying the benefits of the economy, not what we've gone through for the last 5 or 6 years.
Pretty much. Alex, just 2 minutes as we get ready to step out on this break, as we get ready to also look at the other headlines that we have for you this morning. Good. I mean, yes, Alex, you have the idea that, well, when you reduce the tax rates, then tax collections also increase. But, well, there hasn't been an increase. We have a 15% drop if you compare what we won now as of last year, because that's the comparison period that we have on the table. Are you saying, well, go back and borrow? Because that's the only way that they can actually now mitigate that gap that we have. But doesn't that also therefore create another problem again when we're coming back to normalcy in the economy? Just 2 minutes if you may.
I'll build on what Enoch CPA Monari said, right? This is not business as usual, right? We should be collecting more if it was business as usual. But yes, we've had the cuts in the tax rates, but at the same time, we're also dealing with a pandemic that no economy has ever dealt with in the history of the world. So we are all trying to figure our way fiscally out of this. Number two, in terms of comparing tax collections, anytime you want to look at tax collections, you look at the performance of the different taxes. Corporate tax should only increase if companies are making profits. Payee should only increase if we are creating more jobs and salaries are going up. Excise duty and VAT should only increase because remember those two taxes are consumption taxes. So question is there increased consumption? Number two, do Kenyans have increased disposable income for them to continue consuming more than they consumed in the previous quarter? We do not have that. Number three, I think we need to look at the recovery phase. Most companies next year are going to be paying back the loans that they took from banks this year, that they took for business continuity and in order to survive. Most of them are going to try and reinstate to the payroll some of the employees who are sent on unpaid leave, and they're going to try and bring back the pre-pandemic wages and salaries of their employees. They're not going to do this if Treasury is going to strike at the recovery moment and say, here is the increased tax burden, let's take this back. Last but not least, let's not blame public debt on our tax rates. The public debt crisis right now is due to two words, and that is fiscal indiscipline. This country, this government, since 2013, has been on a borrowing spree, and at the same time, the revenue or the ordinary revenue being collected by the exchequer has not been matching up the public debt. And so there's only one single solution: revitalize the economy. Once you revitalize the economy, then we are going to get back to higher tax collections and we're able to sustain our public debt. And that's, of course, without saying that we need to rationalize our recurrent expenditure. And last but not least, we need to fiscally consolidate our debts. Yeah.
Pretty much. It's a good thing that we have two lawyers in the house this morning, because our next issue is going to look into SRC at loggerheads with Kenyatta National Hospital employees over their salaries, something that they signed 8 years ago, once we come back here on Business AM.